Hello, I made a guide that will show you how to build a Master Rank 3 worthy starter deck with basic/free cards. This means that you can make this deck without having to unlock any cards other than getting your class to level 10. I also show you alternative picks if you do have some cards unlocked, which might be good choices. And in the end I will post a link to a commentated gameplay video with the starter deck. Okay, so the important part of building a custom deck is paying attention to the deck's mana cost. I made sure that we had a strong early game while also having a lot of control in the end game. So I started with the 1 mana spells. I didn't have all the cards that I wanted to have, but I tried to adjust it as much as I could to make it work. I started with 2 Holy Smites to make sure that we could deal with the early creatures that the enemy could summon. Alternatives for Holy Smite would be one, that's my personal favorite, it's the Fairy Dragon. Cannot be targeted by spells or hero powers, so that's really amazing to have early game. The only real counter to that is summoning his own creatures or using weapons. But I personally have had so much success by using that Fairy Dragon. It forces them to play, it forces them to be aggressive when they are trying to be defensive. But if they can deal with it, you can actually deal a lot of damage with your Fairy Dragon. So that's always a good choice. I usually have 2 of them in every single deck. On the other hand, you can also go for Loot Hoarder, which is also an okay card. It's not as safe as the Holy Smite, since you do have to summon that Loot Hoarder, and it's also not as effective as the Holy Smite because certain classes like Druids, Mages and other classes that have some kind of hero power that could deal 1 damage can actually deal with your Loot Hoarder without it having the chance to trade against the enemy. So I would prefer here to have a Holy Smite or a Fairy Dragon, but if you really felt that Loot Hoarder would help you out more and that card draw was needed, you can go for it. Also going for double Mind Vision, since we only use basic cards, we don't have many strong cards available, and Mind Vision will allow us to look into the enemy hand and actually see what he has and adapt to it, rechange our strategy and all that stuff, but also potentially get a very strong card that we did not have available to us. I've had multiple times that I took a legendary, that I just took a Flame Strike out of his hand or a Polymorph, so you can get a lot of value, but there is still a bit of RNG in there. I normally wouldn't suggest using it at the first turn. Like if you do draw a Mind Vision at turn 1, I wouldn't suggest to use it then, but keep it until later when you know he has a strong card remaining in his hand and you need to see in his hand to plan your strategy for the next turn. But if you have no early cards, you had a bad draw, you can use that Mind Vision to try to get an early drop. Then a Northshire Cleric. Some priests take 2, I feel 1 is enough. If I would go for 2 Northshire Clerics, I would use it as a bait. A Northshire Cleric is a card that players will always try to take out. It gives you a card draw for every creature that you heal. So it would be a main target for enemies. So you can use it as a taunt, or you can use it as a spell taunt, because they will use spells against it. But I think 1 is enough, and if you use it for card draw mainly, you can get the maximum value out of it. But you could also put it as bait if you have nothing other to play. Now, for Power Word Shield, you actually have multiple options for this, but for now I'll keep it brief. I was lacking extra card draw in this deck. Card draw makes your deck, I feel. It's one of the priorities that you should go for on your deck. Having 1 extra card draw makes a big difference. Now, Power Word Shield, you can actually use it quite aggressive as well, or defensive, by buffing up your own creatures, getting it just high enough health to safely trade against an enemy creature. Especially early game, it makes a big difference, surviving those early 2 drops. There are alternatives to discard. I personally, in my main priest deck, I would be using Loot Hoarders instead of the Power Word Shield. I've seen its effectiveness, but I feel having a minion on the field actually helps a lot more than having the power word shield, just because you can actually use that minion to take out creatures. Now of course the loot hoarder, because you have two minions, you could go for an engineer or you could go for the loot hoarder, but I feel the loot hoarder is a little bit more aggressive, a bit more damage, and it allows me to take on stronger creatures. So I would suggest here a loot hoarder, which is able to take out most 2-drops. Also, if you do not feel like you need that extra minion, you feel the spells is enough, you can go for Thought Steal instead, and Thought Steal is one of the most amazing priest cards. You copy 2 cards from your opponent's deck. Insane, right? You copy. So you make 2 new cards that weren't there before, so you don't even draw from your own deck. I don't know. I would always suggest going for Thought Steal. Having 2 Thought Steals in your deck is amazing. Having 3 or 4 from an arena is even more amazing. For the 2 mana drops, I took the Ooze and the Shadow Word Pain. The Ooze for the early pressure, but also the Ooze for the ability to destroy an opponent's weapon. Now if you don't get it in the first few turns, I'd usually just keep the Ooze ready to destroy an enemy's weapon. Now if you play against a class like a mage that doesn't have a weapon, you can use it as freely as you want. But if you're playing against a warrior, where you know most of the warriors use 2 Arcanite Reapers, which is a 5 damage weapon, you want to keep an Ooze ready for that to destroy it. Same with rogues and any other class that has strong weapons. Another one good example is a shaman, but I would only keep 1 Ooze for that, since a shaman would probably only have 1 Doomhammer that you'd have to be careful of. So if you did get that Ooze in that first turn, since we have 2, you can freely use it to be aggressive. Alternatives to Ooze are, I think I only have 1, because I want to keep 1 Ooze. You want to keep always 1 Ooze in your deck to be able to deal with it. Now if you don't feel too comfortable having 1 single Ooze, you can always trade it out, but I think personally I would keep 1. My alternative would be getting a Fairy Dragon. Most amazing early game card. Has a lot of good pressure, and I've already earlier explained why I like this card as much, so yeah. We'll move on into the Shadow Word Pain. There's no alternatives here. Shadow Word Pain, I use it to take out the most important early game creatures, or if I have nothing else to play. So let's say he summons a 3/2 sorceress on the field, you can use your Shadow Word Pain to take it out. It can take out any creature. I think even most 3 mana creatures can be taken out by the Shadow Word Pain. Now if you're up against a mage and you get your Shadow Word Pain somewhere in mid game, you could actually be smart enough to keep it for a while to deal with like pesky berserkers, for example. Berserker has 2 damage and 7 health, and if it gets enraged it gains another 3 attack every time it gets damaged. So you can use even your Shadow Word Pain to take that out. Against hunters, you'd want to keep them for the most important cards like hyenas, buzzards and stuff like that, but you'll get that with experience. For the 3 mana drops, I took 2 Shadow Word Dads, a Grizzly, double Sun Cleric and a Wolf Rider. Now the Shadow Word Dad, quite an amazing card. You'd want to keep this for the end game. You destroy a minion of an attack of 5 or more. It is like an upgraded big game hunter. There's no real alternative to this card. I don't think there's anything that could beat it. At first I did think to change one of the Shadow Word Dads, but I decided against it afterwards from my own experience, that I felt that I still needed that second Shadow Word Dad. So get 2 of these, especially with a basic deck you want them. Next up, the Grizzly. The Grizzly, normally I would never suggest this. I don't think you need taunts that much. I usually only get 1, maybe 2 taunts, depending on my class. But having a 3/3 Grizzly early game can help you out, especially as a priest. You want to survive that early game. Mid game and late game you become much stronger with all the control cards that you have. Now this is a good target to use your Power Word Shield on. Getting a 3/5 creature, also getting a card draw. My alternatives would be getting either a Fairy Dragon or an Injured Blade Master. Injured Blade Masters are really amazing. A 3 mana drop that is 4 attack and 3 health. which you can also heal back up to 7 since its battle cries deal 4 damage to himself. Now my favorite part about the Injured Blade Master is actually that it has 4 damage, which means that enemy priests won't be able to counter it. Many of their cards will become useless against a 4 attack creature, like the Shadow Word Death or Pain. Both can't affect 4 damage creatures. Now for the Sun Cleric, it's one of my favorite 3-drops. You pretty much gain a 3/3 creature that also can buff up allied minions with 1 extra attack, 1 extra health. It's an amazing card. I usually get 1, but since we're limited to basic and free cards only, we are going for 2. This will also allow us to buff up any 3/3 creatures to 4 attack if needed when you're playing against priests, but I usually use it to safely trade against an enemy or just become strong enough to take out an enemy minion. For the Wolf Rider, I've only taken this card as a card removal. Normally, instead of the Wolf Rider, I would be using a Shadow Madness, but it's a rare card, we still need to unlock that. So as a free card, the Wolf Rider does its job. Okay, for our 4 mana drops we went for the Dragonling mechanic. The Dragonling mechanic, I think it's okay card to deal some early pressure. It does have 4 health, so it will survive through most 2 drops, it will survive through most 3 drops. You also get a 2/1 creature as a second summon, which allows you to split your DPS to multiple minions, also adding in some extra pressure. They're most likely to take out a 2/1 creature first and ignoring your 2/4. Now there are some alternatives. I would use the Arcanine Soul Priest, which is an amazing card. All your hero powers or units that do healing instead deal damage. So as a priest you can use your hero power to deal 2 damage to any target that you want with that priest up on the field. Another good one, which I would really suggest, is having a Spellbreaker. Having at least 1 single silence in your deck is amazing. The Spellbreaker also has decent stats for a 4 mana drop, so that's always a good pick. Next would be up the Chillwind Yeti. 4 mana for a 4/5 creature. Can survive through most AoE attacks like Flame Strikes, even stronger spells like Shadow Bolts from the Warlock. And also trade safely against most 3/4, I'd say even some 5 drops. So this is always a good pick in any deck. I would suggest Yeti pretty much in any deck. Also, once again, having 4 attack, it cannot be affected by Shadow Word Pains or Deaths. And Nomis Inventor. I took it for the card draw for a decent amount of health and still having 2 attack. And it pretty much can take out most 2 drops safely. An easy alternative, once again, Spellbreaker. Pretty good choice here. The Shieldmaster. Normally I would not suggest the Shieldmaster. The Shieldmaster does have 3 attack, which means it is vulnerable. If you're up against Priest, Shadow Word Pain would be able to take it out easily. It does have 5 health. It can defend itself, so if you needed to survive that extra round early game, it's only 4 mana. You can drop this one out. It can also easily take out most 3 or 2 drops. A good alternative that I would suggest is going for an Abomination. Mainly because it does have some decent board clear. As soon as the Abomination dies, it deals 2 damage to all other characters. Now for the 5 mana drops, the best pick here is Holy Nova. Amazing card, deals 2 damage to all enemies and also heals 2 to all your allied creatures. Get 2 of them. Yeah, I don't think there's any better card than that one. We have the Gurubasi Berserker. Whenever this minion takes damage, you gain +3 attack. I only put 1 in because it is quite vulnerable. So you have to be very careful with that card, that you at least have it protected or some easy way of getting it damaged. Now if he has a low damage creature on the field, it's the perfect time to summon this creature. And the best thing about this, it synergizes well with the priest, because we can heal the Gurubasi Berserker, so every time it does get damaged and every time it does get buffed, you can just get it back up to full health. It will not lose its buff. It does not count as enrage. There's a very good alternative for the the Gurubasi Berserker that I would suggest, which is the Azure Drake. It gives you 1 card draw and also 1 spell damage for 5 mana, while having still a 4/4 creature on the field. You can use this in combination with, let's say, Holy Fire, your Smite. You can also use it in combination with your Holy Nova, which all would deal 1 extra damage instead. So a pretty decent card. Even just for the card draw, you already get a lot of value out of it. For our 6 mana drops, we have the Boulder Fist Ogre and a Reckless Rocketeer. We were lacking some high drops. Boulder Fist Ogre does give decent stats for a 6 mana, 6 attack and 7 health, but nothing too special. It's just it's an okay high card. We're getting 2. I personally would suggest, if you have the cards available, to go for a Holy Fire. Holy Fire is an amazing card. It deals 5 damage and also heals your hero for 5. So it's decent card removal. You do want to have 1 high card, at least 1 high card. We have many ways as a priest to deal with high cards, with Shadow Word stats, mind controls and stuff like that. I use a double Holy Fire. I also use a Baron Geddon in my main deck. Baron Geddon mainly for its card removal, because Baron Geddon does deal 2 damage to all other characters at the end of your turn. But yeah, you can substitute it for any other high creature if you want. If you feel like you could get more effective out of other high creatures, maybe you unlocked a new high creature, you can use that instead of the Boulder Fist. For the Reckless Rocketeer, I mainly took this card because it has charge with 5 attack. You could exchange it for a Holy Fire. I personally like going for a Arcane Golem. Not many like this, but I see it as a very cheap endgame card. It does have charge, it has 4 attack. It only costs 3 mana, which means you can play different cards next to this card to put up some extra pressure. And this card itself deals with most mid-game minions. Now for our last 2 cards, I'm going for Mind Control. Yeah, there's no real explanation needed here. Take control of an enemy minion. Amazing endgame card. You can actually pretty much turn games around with this. Be careful, you don't want to mind control any low mana creatures. Try to wait for that opportunity where your mind control makes the biggest difference, especially legendaries. Well, that's pretty much my basic / free deck that you could create. I've been successfully using this deck against Master Rank 3 players in ranked mode. It's an easy deck to create. It only requires you to get your priests up to level 10. Now if you do like this guide, I can make some more for different classes. If I was going to make a new one, it would be the mage next. Also, if you would like to see something else, or if you have any kind of feedback, I would love to hear it, so I can change up my guides, I can change up the next content I produce. I will also be releasing a video right after this one with some gameplay footage.